Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. What are you celebrating today? For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is all about celebrating life, celebrating art, celebrating artists, celebrating whatever it is that we can find to celebrate. And I believe that if we take the time, we can find things to celebrate each and every day. And I am so excited that today we're going to have Richard and Michael on our show. We are going to talk about Broadway. We're going to talk about the golden age of Broadway. We're going to talk about beyond the golden age of Broadway. We are going to talk about Greenwich Village. We're going to talk about gay life, something I know a little bit about. We're going to talk about so many incredible things. We're going to talk about our mutual friend, Rick McKay. We're going to talk about the return of nightlife in New York, the return of live theater. Before I talk to both of them, I want to say last night I was at Feinstein's 54 Below. I went to see Karen Mason. And my God, if anyone gets a chance to see Karen Mason, I'm going to say something. And if you get the chance to see her, I'm going to say I put her right up there with Judy Garland and Barbra Streisand. She walked into that room and she owned that room. Everybody was vaccinated. Everybody was boosted. Everybody was excited. And I was thrilled to be in that presence again. And I'm thrilled to be with you, Richard and Michael, today. And I want to ask you both, before we start, what are you two celebrating today?
Wow. Well, we're celebrating the fact that we got our Broadway documentary on PBS. We're celebrating Michael's new book. We're celebrating our ages, both in our 70s and being healthy and happy and just celebrating life. We're very grateful.
Yeah. Well, I want to say if this is what 70 looks like, I can't wait.
Thank you very much.
Yes. You know, it's so funny. I mean, let's talk a little bit about Michael. I want to show you one of my prized possessions. It's marked up because this is signed, but you can't see because the glare is there. Carol Lawrence, Barbara Cook, Sally Ann Howes, Rick McKay, Celeste Holm. They all signed this. This was the original CD, the DVD. And when this came out, Rick McKay, he devoted his life to chronicling Broadway, the golden age. The original film came out. I even have a picture here. This is me with Rick McKay many years ago. And Rick and I, we actually went to Chita Rivera's opening night for Chita Rivera, A Life on Broadway. We shared the duties of our date that night was Betsy Palmer. Both of you knew Betsy Palmer as well. How did the two of you meet Rick McKay to begin with?
Well, I'll start because I think I met him just a few days, a little bit before Michael. I was working at the Museum of Television and Radio, which now has since been renamed the Paley Center. And a friend who worked there, Jane Clain, said this man was coming in to do some research on some Broadway actors, and would I like to meet him? And I was running the library at that time, and so we met and we talked about Broadway. He was looking for clips of various performers, and he said he was doing this documentary, and he wanted to invite people up to see what he'd done. He has about 30 minutes of a documentary. He's looking for people who would donate some money, and I said, well, that's something that my partner and I, we weren't married yet, Michael and I would like to do. And so we decided that we would attend his soiree, and I'll let Michael continue from there.
We walked in, and immediately to our right, there was a director's chair with this lovely older woman sitting in it. And at a glance, you could tell that she was somebody. You didn't know, but in a little Chanel suit and a little Chanel bag and hair and makeup, just perfect. And I thought it was probably maybe some Broadway benefactor or something. And she was introduced to us as Faye. And we said hello, and we went around the room, and Rick had a giant poster of King Kong that was signed by Fay Ray. And we looked at each other and went, that's Fay Ray, oh my God, we just met the Fay Ray. And so that kind of set a tone for the evening. And then we sat down, he showed us the 30 minutes, and we were hooked.
And yeah, and for people, especially I'm a few years older than Michael, that Fay Ray was probably the first actress that most of us had ever seen on TV, a movie actress on TV. And so for us to meet her was just such a thrill, something I never thought would happen. And then we thought about it after we watched the 30 minutes that he showed us, and we thought, a lot of people have a hard time finding famous people to be in documentaries, because these famous people, they don't know who these people are. They don't know where it's going to be shown. They don't know what control they're going to have over their interview. But I thought, I'm the archivist for Eva Marie Saint. I'm the archivist for Kim Hunter. We knew Ann Jackson and Eli Wallach. We could get him some of these people to be in the documentary. And I thought that's something that we could do for him. So we went from this just a voyeur of a 30-minute documentary to someone who became an archivist. And then we thought, well, maybe we can give money and we can raise some money and we can be producers. So that's how it all started. And we worked together for, I would say, over 20 years.
Now, had either of you ever produced anything prior to this? Had either of you even thought of producing anything?
Probably I hadn't. I had done some acting, and but I guess it's always a dream to be a producer, but you don't even think it could happen to you. And so it was kind of a dream come true.
Now I'm going to
inch our way in.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying we just sort of inched our way in, and it just sort of grew and grew over time.
Now, I'm going to go way back with both of you, because I always like to begin. I don't like to think of this as an interview, but a conversation that a few people are going to be eavesdropping on. I always like to go back to the 5-year-old self. Me, the 5-year-old self, or I think we've got a 6-year-old photograph with one of you. That's the age when you are starting school. Peer pressure begins to get added upon you. You begin to morph into what the other students in school want you to be or not be, and what the teachers decide that you're going to be or not be. And I think we're going to start with you, Mikey. Here you are. And you look exactly the same. Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about this little boy, where you were living at the time and the world that you were living in?
I was living in Louisville, Kentucky. My father was a New Yorker who met my mom after the war and settled in Louisville. She was from Louisville. I had an older brother and an older sister who were cut out of that photo you just saw. At that point, I was probably starting school in Catholic school, and this is 1950s parochial school system with the nuns who were absolutely terrifying. And and of course I was a little gay boy who didn't have any concept of what that meant, but I knew I was different even then. And I write about it in my book, that there's this little boy that was so influenced by his religion and by the nuns and the priests and that, but somehow they didn't get deep in enough to ever make me feel bad about myself, So I was lucky in that way, and I had a very good home life. You know, I had a wonderful mother and father. A father who worked 2 jobs all his life to support us, and worked till he was 84 years old. And so I would say I was really blessed in the family department, and very, very, very fortunate.
And Richard, we're going to do the same thing with you. Now, your siblings were not cut out of this picture. Here they are. Tell us a little bit about what you remember from this picture.
Oh, that's my lovely sister Gail and my wonderful brother Ray. And you know, I'm one of the few people who can actually say, they're both older than I am, that I have never had a bad word said from either one of them to me. I mean, they teased me, we had fun together, but I'm so lucky. My brother was holding our parakeet Poochie. I was holding my little cat Smokey. And you know, someone said the way you can tell your drag name is to your first pet and the first street that you lived on. So my cat's name was Smokey, and the first street that we lived on was Seneca. So my drag name would be Smokey Seneca.
Smokey Seneca.
If I can interject, mine would be Lady Ardmore.
And mine would be Shorty 544.
Shorty 544. You win. Okay. No, but I was lucky too. I had a wonderful childhood growing up in a beautiful little town in New Jersey called Scotch Plains. It was kind of the woods between Plainfield and Westfield. I walked to high school through an orchard with cows and deer grazing. I was lucky. I was never bullied. I was never teased. In fact, I took Michael to my 50th high school reunion some years ago, and I think we were kind of treated like celebrities because we were the gay couple, you know, and it was really fun, and everyone was so wonderful to us, and so we were both lucky in that regard with pretty good childhoods.
Well, that's really wonderful. I mean, my husband and I, you know, we went to our 40th a couple of years ago, and the same thing happened. I want to jump ahead with each of you. And of course, Michael, I'm going to bring this up because you cover this so brilliantly in your book. And I want to applaud you for your openness, for you telling the story. It really gives a depiction of what it was like coming through the Stonewall Rebellion, living through the 70s, what it was like living in New York at that time. For those of us, I came to New York in 1979. Richard, what year did you move to New York? And you didn't have that far to travel to get to New York.
No, well, I had been in the Peace Corps, and actually I came out when I was in the Peace Corps, which was very lucky for me because I was able to have sex in every single country, traveling home all through Asia and Europe. And it was the 70s, and I was young, and so it was a wonderful time. So I actually reaped all the benefits. I moved back to New Jersey to begin with, got a job teaching there, but soon met a young guy in New York. He lived in Greenwich Village on a beautiful street called Perry Street. And we decided to move in here. And we were actually the first interracial couple ever to live on Grove Street. And when we moved in, you know, I joked that I moved in with a man, a Black, and a Catholic. My mother had 3 reasons to jump off the balcony, but she didn't, and she got over it, and we had a wonderful time, and it was that kind of, as I said, we reaped all the benefits of Stonewall. It was a wonderful time pre-AIDS. We had about 8 or 9 wonderful years where there was a gay restaurant in every other corner. You could walk down the streets holding hands. Nobody cared about your sexuality, your race, your religion. So I really was so lucky on so many fronts that I hit things seemingly just at the right time.
Mm-hmm. I'd like you both to really talk about that for a moment, because I also coming to New York in 1979, and the New York of 1979 was a very different New York from what it is right now. If you can take everyone back to what the feel was like for the overall image of what New York was like, but especially what it was like in New York, in the Greenwich Village area, because it was very much a haven for the gay community at that time, especially around Christopher Street and Grove Street, which is home to both of you.
Well, I could probably speak to the way Greenwich Village was then, even though Michael can speak to it. He came in to party a lot. But, in the 70s, I think if you were gay, the four meccas of the world were Amsterdam, Berlin, New York, and San Francisco. And of course, in New York, Greenwich Village. So when I moved here in 1974, I think the village was about 80% gay. My building was 80% gay. It was just a wonderful time. It really was a gay ghetto. And you really felt so safe here. People, I remember sunbathing on a pier down by the river, and we could hear the Circle Line cruise go, and we could hear the announcer say, "And now we're coming to Greenwich Village on your left, the biggest gay ghetto in the world, or a haven for homosexuals," or whatever they said, but we all laughed and started waving and took off our bathing suits and waved at the cruise ship that went by. But yeah, it was a really wonderful time to be gay in the world, and to be right here in Greenwich Village.
And
I took a much more circuitous route to get here. When I left Louisville in 1975, I lived 4 years in Indianapolis, 4 years in Chicago, 3 years in San Francisco, and 10 years in Boston. And then now I've been about 25 years in New York. So that sounds like it should make me 110, but it really doesn't. So I arrived here in 1994. But
of course, all of this is chronicled in your book. And then, of course, sadly for all of us, if you can both take us back to the time when you both started hearing about, as we all heard about it. I was 18 years old when I came to New York. I was 21 when I first came out, believe it or not, everyone. And when I came out, the AIDS crisis was hitting the papers. It was first talked about as the gay cancer, which was very scary for any of us, especially those of us who were coming out at that time, when you were first starting to hear about it.
Well, I remember hearing about it in about 1979, that people were talking about somebody was really sick on 23rd Street, and they would go up and take care of this beautiful young man who was having sores all over his face and his body, and no one knew what it was. I don't think the first case was really diagnosed or put in the papers maybe till 1981?
Summer of 1981.
Yeah. But, you can just imagine that this was a time, I mean, when the gay clubs, the night scene in New York was at its peak. There were so many huge discos, 12 West, Flamingo, Studio 54, all these wonderful places that you could go from one to the other. And then you would hear these rumors of people getting sick. And I remember that being a teacher, I was commuting from Greenwich Village to work as a high school English teacher in New Jersey. And I was friendly with a lot of female teachers, and they all wanted to come in and see my apartment in Greenwich Village, and they all wanted to see how I lived. And I remember that we planned this weekend where they would all come in for the day, and I had gotten my friend to show them a brownstone, a carriage house, my apartment. So it was this wonderful day. Well, that weekend in 1984, 85, Rock Hudson died. Well, that put everything into the public persona. And that weekend, one by one, each one of those teachers called me and canceled on the trip, because no one knew how you got it, where you got it. Were they going to get it from my silverware? Were they going to get it from hugging me? And I didn't know. So I couldn't really blame them for canceling, but it was really a tragic time. And then you started, you didn't want to kiss anybody on the lips. You would turn your head. And to this day, when people kiss me on the lips, I have the impulse to turn my head, because it was so impactful during that time, what was going on.
And for me, when I read that article in, I think it was June of 81, I knew I was a goner. I was just certain. If there was a disease that was killing gay men, I had been everywhere and I had done everything that all these boys were dying. And so I started living my life in a different way. It became a degrading sort of thing to a point where I I stopped living and I quit my job. I got rid of my BMW and that. I changed my entire lifestyle because I started living as though I were going to die. There wasn't a test at first. And even when they first developed an HIV test, you didn't want to take it because there was no treatment. So I'd rather have not known. And oddly enough, against all odds, I was HIV negative. And very few of my friends were so fortunate. In fact, I lost most everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And but I couldn't believe that I could survive when everyone around me wasn't. But I did.
And there's so few people left of our age. I mean, maybe if you weren't going out to parties and you were a studious type and just stayed home, maybe some of them survived. But the boys that went out, I mean, really, there's so few. So between people dying of AIDS and then Greenwich Village becoming expensive, a lot of gays were starting to move to Chelsea. So then Chelsea became the gay epicenter of New York. And then, of course, as we always do, the gay boys fix up the neighborhood. There's shutters and flowers everywhere. And then, the prices go up there. And then more gay men were dying. And so the numbers were decreasing. And so now the gay epicenter of New York is really the Hell's Kitchen, the theater district, which in a way makes sense because so many of gay boys are dancers and actors. And
they call it the dance belt.
Yeah, the dance belt.
At least they used to.
But I was fortunate enough to live here through that. And of course, I've seen Greenwich Village change. I mean, I don't particularly care whether people are straight or gay, but what is sad is that when I moved here, you could be a struggling dancer or writer or actor, and you could live in a small studio apartment in Greenwich Village. Now the houses on Grove Street are going for $26 to $28 million. Apartments in this building are up to $7,000 a month. So, you can't be a young gay person unless you're into banking, maybe. Then you could maybe live in this building. Otherwise, you're living in Hell's Kitchen, maybe with 2 or 3 other guys, or you're living in Brooklyn or Queens, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it means that the gay community is much more dispersed than it was back in the 70s and early 80s.
Well, it was also an artist mecca.
Yes.
Beyond just being, a gay mecca,
Yes.
A lot of artists came to Greenwich Village because it was so easy to live there because of the low cost of living there. And over the years, I mean, you two, what are some of the biggest changes beyond the obvious that you've just described that the two of you have experienced in terms of changes that you've seen happen in the village that you really are missing the most from when you first both moved to the village?
Well, we both, I think, try to live in the present. So we don't spend too much energy missing things. And there were a lot of wonderful things about that time. But I have to remind people that during that time, there was a lot of crime. There was a lot of graffiti. The streets didn't look as clean or as beautiful. There have been over a million trees planted. The village has never looked greener. The houses have never looked more beautiful. Us painting the mailboxes in the neighborhood. We have the whole waterfront down by Greenwich Village, which we never had before. There was one pier. You walked down Christopher Street and you went out on the Morton Street pier, and that was it. Now you can pretty much circumnavigate the whole island of Manhattan on bike or rollerblades. So many. And now when we talk at block association meetings, we're not talking about someone getting robbed or mugged. We're talking about maybe a delivery boy riding his bike the wrong way on the sidewalk, or we're talking about something like that, or someone's lights are too bright or not bright enough. So yeah, they're all important, but put things in perspective. So there's a lot of things that are really wonderful about the present also, and that's really what I'd rather focus on.
It's a series of trade-offs you lose something, you gain something, so it's better, I think, to focus on what you've gained. That there is, I would say, there's probably, we've lost some sort of youthful energy in the West Village. That you can find it a little in the East Village when you go over there, but which is, I think, a lot more like the West Village way back when. So there is that youthful energy that has moved on from here. But as Richard was saying, this neighborhood has never looked better. It's beautiful, and there are flowers everywhere, and wonderful restaurants, and so it's still a great place to live.
And there are people, luckily we count ourselves in this category, that are trying to keep Greenwich Village as a cultural center. For instance, we have friends that give soirees in, a friend Brooke on Barrow Street, who gives soirees in her house and she sings opera and she has people recite poetry. The next block association over, the BBC, they just had a literary night where they have people come and they read from their books and read poetry. We run the Greenwich Village Film Festival with our friend Alessia Gatti. So there are still people trying to keep Greenwich Village as a safe place for bohemians, for artists, and so there's still a lot going on here. It's you maybe have to look for it a little harder, but it's definitely here.
Well, I want to get back to you guys for a moment. How did you two meet?
We met right on a street corner, just a half a block from here, in the corner of Grove and Bedford. I was coming from one direction, he was another. He was dressed up in a suit and looked very crisp and businesslike, and our eyes met. We smiled at each other. It is very much an old school meeting, and we started talking, and that's the way it started, really.
And, you know, really, I have to say that is how I met all my boyfriends, on the street. Either I had a dog, and then I had two dogs. I had Akita, so I would meet people walking the dogs. Or if you had a grocery bag in Greenwich Village, if you were carrying groceries, they knew you lived in the neighborhood. So you suddenly went from a C+ to an A, because people said, wow, he's not only, okay, he's kind of cute, but he must have lived nearby. So it was before cell phones, of course, and before apps.
So that's what I want to say, everyone, put your phones down.
Yeah. And also, you know, you're looking at the total package. When I saw him, I didn't see one body part. I saw this handsome man coming down Bleecker with a great smile, beautiful hair, you know, a nice personality. And no one, it's not even like being in a bar. No one's drunk. There's no fake lighting. You're not with your friends. So you don't have to worry about what they're thinking about you or your choices. It's just the eyes. You meet, you connect. And if there's a connection, you go from there. And it was one of the best days of my life, meeting Michael, and this is almost 23 years later. So
congratulations. That's wonderful. And I mean, both of you are so incredibly active with your careers, and you've made a career out of your involvement in so much. I want to go back. You know, we talked about the beginning of the AIDS crisis and everything. Did both of you at that time become activists?
I would say I wasn't, I wouldn't have called myself an activist. I was a very low-key activist, but I did an awful lot of work with taking care of AIDS patients. You know, I was an AIDS buddy, and I also took care of my partner 10 years until he died, and my best friend 17 years until he died. So my participation really was more in the personal care. You know, there were other people on the front lines that act up, and I was probably a lot sadder than I was angry. You know, I don't usually go to a place of anger, and I didn't want to get involved with ACT UP because it was so anger based. They did an extraordinary job, actually. You know, so I'm not taking, but it wasn't right for me. A lot of my friends were in ACT UP, so I took the route of actual caring for the dying. You know, and so that was pretty much my participation.
Yeah, I think that's what you did. You kind of, you know, you saw people in your own building walk, you know, 1 year, a beautiful hunky guy, and you'd see him 6 months later and you thought he was 60 years old with a cane, you know, walking to get his groceries. So you did what you could to grocery shop for people, to help people with doctor's appointments, things like that. But I was also busy. I was teaching. I was going for my master's at that time. I had two dogs. I had, you know, so, you know, we also had lives, and also you at that point you still didn't know how you caught it. So, people were afraid. And as much as you tried to help people, okay, well, how should I touch them? Should I kiss them? What should I, how far should I go, even being a friend with someone? And it wasn't until much later, what would you say, Michael, we actually found out that you couldn't get it from just touching someone.
Touching a doorknob.
Early on.
What?
It was pretty early on, I think, but I couldn't put a year on it.
Well, but it was in the mid 80s, I would say.
Early to mid 80s,
Yeah.
Now, as I said, both of you are so involved in so many projects together. When the two of you met, did you say 23 years ago?
Yes.
When the two of you met, were either of you very involved in either of these activities that you're currently involved in?
No, not now that I think about it. No, I've been an interior designer for 50 years, and so that was my primary thing. I had a lot of self-employed. I had an interior design firm of one, and so I had a lot of clients locally and other places around the country, and that pretty much kept me busy. As we have moved more into all these other endeavors, I've cut back farther and farther and farther, and to a point where now I only work for clients who I've worked for before and have special needs to that. But so I really can't think of any outside projects that I had like the ones that we have now.
And for me, they have this great program in New Jersey where if you teach for 25 years, you can get your pension and your medical benefits for the rest of your life. And even though I love teaching, I really didn't like commuting and getting up at 5:30 in the morning and driving to New Jersey. And so it was more of the commuting that I was tired of. So I took the early retirement. I was 50 years old, and I knew that then I could really pursue some of the things where I didn't have to worry about making money at them, like acting, like producing, like the things like that. I worked at the Museum of Television and Radio, but that didn't pay that well. But I didn't really need the money that much, so I was able to pursue. I had a stint on The Guiding Light for a while, a soap opera, which was fun. I was even Marie Saint's archivist and Kim Hunter's archivist, so I did that. And then I got involved with the Block Association because I knew that having my Peace Corps training and there, I could organize, I could make things happen, and so I got involved in that, and here I am still the Block Association president. Many years later, I thought I would love to give it up, but young people are too busy to do it, and so I just.
And you're good at it.
Oh, thank you.
And you're good at it. So, what is it about producing that both of you love so much?
I think in particular, because I don't have a very wide experience in producing, apart from Rick McKay's movies, is that I had such a belief in his ability as a filmmaker, and the fact that he was doing work that no one else was doing. And if he hadn't gotten those interviews before all these people died, all of these stories would have died with him. So for me, it was more focused on his first film and getting involved in that, and then going into the second film. And I was so taken by his ability to stand out of the story, but still tell the story so beautifully. I mean, when you watch his films, it's as though you're witnessing a conversation among all these people because they're all talking about the same things, and his editing was so good that he has people finishing each other's sentences, and they weren't even in the same room. They're totally different interviews. And so there's this beautiful, seamless conversation that you watch, and when you leave the theater, you think you've been hearing these people all sitting down together having a conversation. And so I got pulled in because of that. That I just was so impressed by the story he was telling and the need for that story, because we both, long before Rick, of course, we were both Broadwayophiles, is whatever it's called. But my first Broadway show was when I was a little boy, and we saw Once Upon a Mattress, and I was
wow.
And I've been in love with Broadway ever since. So it was a natural. So for me, it wasn't so much about producing; it was about being involved as being pulled into this thing called producing.
And along with Rick's longer films, I've got two great stories of how we got into shorter films. One was that I was at the gym and I saw this very interesting looking guy, and turned out he was an actor and he was from India. And we started talking, and he said something very interesting to me. He said, my goal is to watch every single Academy Award winning film from Wings to the present. Now, just the fact that he knew what Wings was, I mean, most American actors, young kids, wouldn't even have heard of Wings. I was so impressed with that. And so I thought, well, you know, I told him, I said, my husband and I, we have a large collection of DVDs. We have all the classics. We have wonderful films. Why don't you come over? Because if you just do the award-winning films, the Academy Award-winning films for Best Picture, you're going to miss out on a lot of other wonderful Hitchcock films, Ilya Kazan films, etc. So why don't you come over and we will start lending you some films. What he did. And not only would he borrow the films, but he would bring them back, eager for more. And he was so excited to talk about them. So one day I said, Karan, I just was interested in finding out something about him. And I said, and I kind of put it diplomatically because I really didn't know the answer. I said, Karan, were you raised in an upper class background, a middle class background, a lower class? He said, oh, very lower class. But he said, you don't even want to know. I grew up very, very poor in India. And he was telling us these stories. And Michael and I looked at each other and I thought, this is a documentary. We should make a documentary about this guy. And we did. And you know, that documentary played, I think, in all over the world, in Indian film festivals. It won so many awards, and through that film festival, through that film, he was able to get his green card, because you know you have to show that you're doing something worthwhile in your profession. And he actually ended up directing that film because he was so talented, and we went on to make a few different films together. And the one other thing that I want to say is that when I heard there was going to be a Greenwich Village Film Festival, I remember hearing about it at the gym, and I thought, well, why didn't I think of this? You know, I knew there's a Tribeca Film Festival, a LGBTQ film festival, even a Chelsea. Why didn't I think of this?
Who even knew you could start a film festival?
And so I told Rick, I said, they have a category called Greenwich Village Portraits. So I went to Rick McKay and I said, Rick, we have got to enter this film festival. We have to. And he said, well, what should we do? I said, well, why don't we take the word Greenwich Village and put it in the computer, and it will come, all the actors that you've interviewed, it will come up what they said about Greenwich Village, whether they worked there, whether they lived there. Well, it ended up, you know, Eva Marie Saint lived in Greenwich Village. She won her Academy Award living on West 9th Street. So many actors lived. Well, we made this short, 20, because they only take short films. We made a short film called Greenwich Village, A World Apart, and we won the first Greenwich Village Film Festival. And that's how Michael and I got involved, because it was a one-night film festival. It was at the Players Theater on McDougal Street, right above the Cafe Wa, a very historic area of Greenwich Village. And but Michael and I looked at each other and said, you know, maybe we could help them, because it was started by two Italian filmmakers to get their green card. They were so smart to do this film festival and to be relevant in their field, and which worked. But it was one night, and we thought, you know, we know the owners of all the restaurants, we know the block associations, maybe we could help them take this festival to the next level. And that's what we did. And so 7 years later, we just had our 7th year of Greenwich Village 7th annual festival at the Quad Movie Theater. It was
just last week,
the best ever. You know, so we're proud of that. And that's what we're trying to keep, as I said before, Greenwich Village, this place for creative people.
Now, one of your friends asked on Facebook if you were Batman, who was Batman or Robin? And I said, and one of you said you have to tune in to find out. So if you're watching, this is why they are a dynamic duo, better than Batman or Robin. I want to show the trailer for Broadway Beyond the Golden Age. You will be in the wings, but you'll be able to show me where we should end the video, because some of the footage did not make it to the final thing for various reasons. And then I want to talk a little bit about Rick McKay, who unfortunately left us too soon, and the road to PBS. So here is the trailer for those of you who did not see this.
Well, listen, I have the perfect way to start this. Are we on?
We are on now, yes.
Remember that line in chorus line? Don't tell me Broadway's dying because I just got here. I think I'm the one that said that.
It was a very exciting time to begin in New York.
I thought we were wonderful and that fortune had thrown us together.
We all started together.
We were all gonna make it. It was all gonna happen.
I remember Meryl sneaking off to second act Liza and coming back and saying, wow, that woman gives everything, everything.
And you hear a voice say, ladies and gentlemen, Gwen Britton is unable to perform. The role of Roxy Hart will be played by Liza Minnelli. And you're on.
You know, I found some footage from Chicago.
Ah!
Have you ever seen it?
No! Oh, darling, please can I see them?
Of course.
Those were the best dance numbers on Broadway. That was the year that both Fosse and Fred and John and myself won the Oscar, the Emmy, and the Tony. You know, I knew that I was built for the Broadway.
Yeah, thank you. Because some of the footage, did not make it to the final cut that ended up on PBS. Rick McKay, unfortunately, died suddenly, and we lost him, which was a shock to all of us who knew him. How did you two find out that he had passed on? And where were you in terms of the process of the film when you got word that he had passed on?
Well, I remember Jamie DeRoy, one of the producers and a good friend, and a good friend of Rick. She called and told us. And, you know, part of me was really shocked. But, you know, Rick, sometimes he didn't take as good care of himself as he should have. His weight went up and down, and we were always worried about him. And so the film, I would say, was maybe 80 or 85% finished. It was very long. He had a 3-hour version, but it was shocking.
Yes, it was. As Richard said, it was unexpected, but not unexpected because he didn't have a very healthy lifestyle. And, you know, he spent so much time in the confines of his studio apartment, which was a film studio apartment. And but still, you just don't expect he's younger than both of us. And you just didn't expect him to die. So it was a huge surprise.
And, you know, think about it. When someone dies and they're single, you know, when they die alone in their apartment, it becomes a crime scene or it has to be cordoned off anyway, because the police don't know what happened, whether he was alone, whether he wasn't, what did he die from. So for many months, the apartment was blocked off. And so 4 of us who were, I would say, closest to Rick, Jane Clain, who my friend at the Paley Center, yes. Jamie DeRoy, Michael, and myself, we decided that we had to keep Rick's legacy going. I mean, this was Rick's, you know, life's work, his dream to have this second film come out. In fact, there was supposed to be a third one, Broadway, The Next Generation, which would have covered Broadway from the mid-'80s until the present. And he had some of those people like Jonathan Groff and Matthew Morrison already interviewed. So we said we have to finish this film. And so it really was a labor of love. The family was wonderful to us, but we had to move everything out of Rick's apartment. He had a whole film studio in his apartment. I mean, with thousands of DVDs and videotapes and hard drives. And I mean, it was a monumental task. And luckily, my ex, Jim, who's 25 years younger, he is a computer expert. And, you know, when someone dies alone, too, no one knows the passwords.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. There used to be a group here. I live in Rockland County, New York. There was a gay men's Rockland potluck group. And the guy who ran the group, unfortunately, again, overweight, died suddenly. And the group disbanded. Nobody knew how to get in touch with the group. The passwords were gone. It was just a mess trying to break into that. And I have a question, and perhaps you can answer this, and if you can't answer it, I respect that. But when a film is being done like this, a documentary, a lot of releases have to be signed and everything. And these releases are signed over to, I'm assuming, Second Act Productions, Rick McKay. Are those releases sometimes transferable in the case of his passing away suddenly like this?
Well, they are, because you have to remember that producers, in effect, own the film also. That Rick was one of the producers, but he was also the director. And luckily, we were able to find all of the release forms. But one thing that people don't realize when you're making a documentary, especially because they think, oh, well, all these actors did it for free. Yes, they did. And we were very grateful that all of these hundreds of actors did this documentary for free. But people don't realize we paid hundreds of dollars for their hair and makeup for each person. And of course, when you do a documentary, the main cost is you have to pay for the rights to every single photograph, every stanza of music, every piece of archival footage. And so the cost of making a documentary is really astronomical. And so money was always a problem. But we were able to get the film, transfer it, take everything to my ex's studio in New Jersey, and he was able to hack into everything really and save the film. And we made him a producer, James Barry, on the film. Now, the story continues because Jim, you never think of getting the passwords from someone who is 25 years younger than you. And surprisingly, Jim died of a heart attack at the age of 50.
Oh my God.
So
Wow.
there the film, this is like a Telemundo, the making of this documentary. And
once again, all the codes and everything were trapped. We didn't have the codes.
We didn't have the codes, and it was in an apartment in New Jersey. Now, luckily, I knew his family, and I knew his current boyfriend, so there was no problem getting the equipment. But still, we had to get the film that was locked in his computer. Luckily, because Jim is a computer nerd, most of his friends are computer nerds, and he had friends who were not only film producers, but real computer geeks, and they were able to hack into the film. Once again, a wonderful director and producer named Kimberly Reed was able to help us, so that once PBS became interested in the film through Jane Clane's diligence and her connections there, Kimberly was able to get in and give PBS what they wanted. And we were really lucky because, all the rights were not paid for on a film. And sometimes when you're trying to get a film shown, you have to present a finished product. But we were lucky that PBS was so interested in our film that they took care of a lot of that for us. And they were absolutely wonderful. Bill O'Donnell, it was incredible to work with at PBS.
So everybody, when you see those pledge drives and you get upset about those pledge drives, they're important.
Absolutely.
Make those donations.
Absolutely.
And we figured that PBS is the gold standard for this kind of product. So we were so happy that we could get it on PBS Great Performances. And it aired across the country in every market, every one of the PBS markets. So, and last August.
And in a way, of course, it was heartbreaking to lose some of the chapters. That we had a 3-hour version that we cut down to 2.5 hours. And then, of course, PBS cut it down to 1.5 hours. And part of it was heartbreaking. But, they were so wonderful. Like I would say, okay, if you have to cut a chapter, we had a wonderful chapter about the making of Chicago with Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse. But I knew there had just been a documentary about Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon. So I said, if you have to cut something, maybe this. There was a wonderful chapter on Raisin in the Sun. It was Raisin in the Sun, first African-American playwright and drama to be produced on Broadway. But there had recently been a documentary about Lorraine Hansberry. So I said, well, maybe this could be shortened or cut. So they were so wonderful with us. And actually, that we ended up with a wonderful film that we are proud of. I am sorry that some of the chapters are missing, but it's quick paced. It's wonderfully made. Great graphics.
They did such a wonderful job on it that, having seen the film as many times as we have, I could watch it and I could see where they just took out a word here and a word there, you know, and they were so meticulous about cutting it down and keeping everything that was the most important. And so we were really impressed with that, and it was beautiful on screen. I mean, it really was polished.
And I felt that it honored Rick McKay.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I mean, as I was watching it, I cried a lot through it, because knowing Rick so well. The last time that I saw Rick was at Joe Cirola's apartment, and he's gone as well. So it was bittersweet to see the film and to know that all that hard work that he put into it, because it was his life's work. I'm going to ask both of you, because his journey begins with his question at the beginning of Broadway, The Golden Age, the first one. He questions the fact, do you think there really was a golden age? And do you each believe that there was a golden age? And do you think that we're living in a golden age now?
Well, one thing that one of the actors points out, I think it might have been Jerry Orbach, he pointed out that all the plays that were running at one time, you know, I can't remember the exact ones that he chose, South Pacific and Arthur Miller's All My Sons Are Streetcar Named Desire, all the different plays that were running at the same time. And maybe that's a little bit changed. But again, there's so many wonderful things on Broadway now, too, that I refuse to believe that. I mean, it was a golden age, but that doesn't mean to say that maybe this could be a platinum age. Maybe we're going into something even better. And, you know, a lot of creativity comes out of hard times. I mean, a lot of the best Black poetry and Black stories came out of the revolutionary times and the Black civil rights movement of the late 50s and 60s. I mean, Langston Hughes, all those people came out of that time. And so a lot of great, I think, writing and composing and things are going to come out of this COVID era, and we don't know what we're going to see. I think it's exciting.
And to answer, I think it was definitely a golden age. I mean, it really was, and that when the one shot scans that page in the New York Times, and you truly cannot believe that all of these great shows were on Broadway at the same time. And what several of the interviewees say, and that is, I didn't realize it was a golden age until it was over, and then I knew. And I even write about this in my book, that maybe you don't know what you've got until it's gone. So if we're in a golden age right now, we probably won't know exactly what it was until we look back at it, or someone looks back at it and says, wow, that was another golden age.
And one of the interesting things about the first two documentaries is that in both Broadway, The Golden Age, and Broadway Beyond the Golden Age, Hollywood came to Broadway for its stars. All those actors, Eva Marie Saint, Ben Gazzara, Julie Harris, they all started on Broadway and then went on to make films. But they started on Broadway. Even in the second documentary, even people like Meryl Streep, Glenn Close, Jeff Daniels, they all started on Broadway and then went to Hollywood.
And not only the actors, but the stories themselves. I mean, Hollywood came to Broadway for South Pacific, and made them all into films. Now they're making Broadway shows from films, you know. Right. So now that's reversed as well.
And now, in order to get some Broadway shows produced, you have to bring in a star from Hollywood to make it. One production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, they had to bring in Scarlett Johansson. And some of the Hollywood actors are wonderful. Some maybe not so much. But if they sell tickets, that's important too. We have to get people in the seats. And so whatever it takes, I guess that's the direction that Broadway takes.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to run out of time, but one of my favorite shows of all time was Inside the Actors Studio. My little homage to James Lipton. He always ended his show with his list of questions, and I've got some random questions, just a little fun game to get to know you, both of you, a little bit better. And I'm going to start with you, Richard. These are just for fun. Richard, the first question is, what is the best thing that you've ever done for your community?
Best thing that I ever did. I think work with the police to make it safe. As a Block Association president, I work very closely with the 6th Precinct to improve not only the things like lighting on the block with buildings and no trespassing signs in the lobbies of buildings, but having police officers walk the beat, to have neighbors complain in the right way, call the right numbers to make a complaint. So I would say just a general improvement of people's lives on Grove Street, and trying to make it as safe and keep it as wonderful as it can be.
Well, God bless you for that. Michael, what topics do you feel most comfortable discussing when you are with strangers that you've never met before? Well, obviously, they're strangers if you've never met them before.
That's a good question. Well, currently, probably my book, because everything's about my book. It's a 6-year project. It's finally published, you know. So,
and it is an amazing book.
And available on Amazon. But it, yeah. So, and the stories within that book are so important to me that that's probably the thing that I would be most likely to talk about.
Great, Richard. What do you think is the best thing about the world that we are currently living in?
Well, for me, it's always travel, but not everyone can travel. But for me, I tell young people, spend your money on experiences, not on possessions. And if you follow that, you know, whether it's experiences of going to a Broadway play or going skiing or going to Amsterdam or traveling, but you know, don't spend all your money on possessions and sit in front of the couch. And I always tell people, if you're going to sit in front of the couch every night and watch TV, you might as well live outside of the city where you have more closet space and cheaper rent. You know, we all sacrifice something to live in this city. And if you're going to live in the city with smaller closets and smaller space, by God, get off your butt, go to the theater, go to the movies, you know, do things around the city, go to museums, support our cultural institutions.
I love that. That's what a great answer. Michael, who in life have you felt the strongest need to protect?
To protect? Probably throughout my whole life, probably it would have been my best friend Randy, who died of AIDS. You know, and
you talked a lot about that in the book.
And that's why I started my book, was writing about him. And he was such a very special person to me, and our lives were so intertwined that I think I was 4 years older, and when I met him, he was a very young, you know, inexperienced 18-year-old gay boy, and I got to be Auntie Mame to his Patrick Dennis, and so probably throughout our relationship, I felt very, very big brotherly to him and very protective of him.
Yeah, and you write so brilliantly about that in the book.
Oh, thank you.
Which is called Gay Boy's Life. Have to plug the title.
We're going to talk about that in a moment. Richard, if you were to receive a gold star for one achievement, what would you desire that to be for?
Maybe being a good teacher, and I think I was. I think, you know, I often say when I taught in the Peace Corps in the jungles of the Philippines, you know, it doesn't matter. You don't need even a formal curriculum. You don't need the best books in the world. All I had was a chalkboard and a piece of chalk. And when you're a good teacher, that's really all you need. Everything else is superfluous. So I would like to think that it's so nice on Facebook when young kids connect with me and they say, "Oh my gosh, you were such a good teacher. You introduced me to Black history," which I tried to, the white teacher teaching Black history and Black literature, because it was mainly an African-American high school. I tried to do my best in those areas. So I think just being a good teacher, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was in the Peace Corps, whether it was at the Museum of Television and Radio, where I helped people find clips of their great aunt who was on the Jackie Gleason show in 1953 or something like that. But I do enjoy teaching and imparting whatever knowledge I have to someone.
Wow, that's great. Michael, whose brain power have you found the most intimidating?
Brain power. I'm trying to think of someone whose brain I was intimidated by. As a young boy, I can say as a young boy, my brothers, because my brother was a genius and I was an underachiever. And I followed him through school. My sister was very smart too, and I followed them through school, and I was the kind of lazy underachiever. And so probably, I mean, as far as intimidating, that would have been my brother.
Okay.
Currently, I can't think of anyone who.
That's a great answer, though. Okay.
Brain power.
Richard, what would you be best at were you to change careers at this point in your life?
Wow. Well, I wanted to be a famous actor, but I think to be a great actor, first you have to start off with a good voice. And I have an okay voice, but I don't have a real theatrical voice. And I think that if I started earlier, maybe I could have gone into voice training and done some things in that way. People say I should go into politics. I say, no, my life is too good. I don't want to ruin it by going into politics. So there were things that I was able to test, but I think that I had the best of both. I had the teaching years in the Peace Corps, high school. I taught some college, and then I was able to transition into some of the creative things. So I like producing, like acting, things like that. So I am really lucky that I've had both sides and have pretty much been able to do what I wanted to do my whole life.
Good for you. Michael, what issues are you most hypocritical about in your profession?
Am I most critical?
Hypocritical.
In my profession, I wonder which profession I'm in, because I've stepped out of interior design and into writing.
I know. Well, you say in your book that you try to step out, but people keep pulling you back in.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I understand the question, actually.
Are you hypocritical about anything in the interior design business?
I can't think of being hypocritical, and if I'm understanding the word hypocritical, in other words, saying one thing and thinking another, or no, I'm pretty straightforward when it comes to design, and I'm very good at expressing, what I think it should be. So I'm sorry, I can't think of anything.
Okay, and and this question is for both of you as a producer. What is the one thing about producing that you love the most? And I'll start with you, Richard.
Well, certainly the least favorite is raising money and asking people for money. But for me, the best thing about producing is, and it's always my fantasy when I am in charge of a product, something, a film, whether it's a film or a play, is to create a group of creative people. For one of our films, it was about New York, and it was so much fun to ask one of our great friends, who's a wonderful singer, composer, to write a song for the film. I love that. I love getting some of our friends to be in the cast, some of our friends to write the music, some of our friends to be the cinematographer. And that's really what I love, when you know everyone and you trust everyone and you're bringing all these creative people together to make something that is really wonderful that you can all be proud of. So that's my favorite thing.
Collaboration.
Yeah.
Yes. And you, Michael?
For me, it would be two things. The applause. That when you sit in a theater of a film that you've produced, and the credits come up and you hear this wild burst of applause, you feel so good about having helped to create this, because you've just made a room full of people so happy, and it shows, and they're so exuberant in their applause and their praise, and it's a wonderful feeling. And the same thing too is when you're watching the film and you hear sighs, or there's an audience reaction that for me, it makes me so happy, because they're feeling what I would hope they would feel. It's like, when back to my book, is that when you write something, you don't know if you're going to touch people's hearts. You hope that you do. And when you write something funny, you certainly don't know if they're going to find it funny. So when people write back to me and say, oh my God, this is the funniest book I've ever read. You know, that this is so fun, and that it makes me so happy. So getting feedback is so good because you know that the emotions that you have wanted to put into this, people actually picked up on it and felt the way you wanted them to feel. I mean, like with my friend Randy, I wanted people to fall in love with this boy because I wanted them to understand what it was like to lose him, you know, and was my primary goal in it, you know, because I wanted people to understand the loss. And that was just one of 250,000 beautiful gay men who were lost. And if I could make them feel that way about my friend Randy, then and feel that loss because they learned to love him so much, then I knew I did my job.
Wow. 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 Well, I want to first of all, you've got me verklempt right now. I love both of you so much. I've enjoyed this hour so much. And there's so many things that you've just touched upon that I want to leave everyone with right now. First of all, and I know I can speak for both Richard and Michael when I say this, to everyone who is watching right now. Those of us who are in this profession, we don't take it for granted when you take the time to spend some time with us, whether it be in a book or going to watch a film or turning on a program on PBS or spending an hour this afternoon watching this show. Feedback is important to us. And I'll tell you how you can help us with this feedback. If this is your first time here on Richard Skipper Celebrates, on my channel, Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube, there's a banner that says Richard Skipper Celebrates. There's a little button that says join the celebration. I got rid of the button that says subscribe because to me, the word subscribe is a faceless, careless word. And to me, I want the people that are part of this experience to feel that you're part of the process. There have been over 350 other artists that have been on this program that I've celebrated. I call it celebrating because I believe that every artist needs to be celebrated. It's about celebrating their body of worth. So my goal is that you will join the celebration by clicking on that button and that you will check out the other 350 other artists that I've celebrated, and that you will celebrate the other artists, hopefully 350 plus more that are coming up in the weeks and hopefully years ahead. Leave a comment here on YouTube and share this with your friends. Let other people know about this. Let people know about Richard and Michael and the incredible work that they are doing. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list and go to the 8th name that pops up on that list. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go to Amazon.com. I want you to order 2 copies of this book. I want you to order 1 copy for yourself. And then I want you to order 1 copy for that 8th friend. The holidays are coming up and they will appreciate it. And then I want you to pick up the phone and I want you to call that friend because, and I'm going to get emotional here, because that friend may not be here tomorrow. It's important that you pick up the phone and you call that friend and you let them know what they mean in your life with a phone call, not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And send them a copy of A Gay Boy's Life.
Wow.
This boy, whether you're gay, straight, or whatever experiences you're having, we all have these experiences going through life. It's about living life. It's about loving. It's about life, loss, everything that we all experience. It's an incredible read. Kudos to you for taking the time to write it, putting it on paper. And I want everyone to read this book. I have a dear friend, David Friedman, great songwriter. And he says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Now, I'm going to leave the screen and I'm going to give the final word to Richard and Michael. You're going to end the show. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to anyone who's watching right now. You don't have to worry about how it's going to end, because as soon as you say goodbye, I know how to end the show. I thank you for being here. I celebrate both of you and your body of worth, and I hope that you'll come back sometime. And let's get together sometime for a drink. Will you do that?
Thank you. Thank you for
Richard.
all
Yes,
you do.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. And you got the final word.
Okay. Well, I'll start. I would just like to point out, our oldest Academy Award-winning actress who's living today is Eva Marie Saint. She is 97, living on her own, and I've learned so much from her. I've learned how to live in the present and not just dwell in the past, and be positive and live a creative life. And that's what I wish for all of you, that you will live in the present and be able to live a creative life. Even if you have a job like banking during the day, you can use that money that you've made to produce a play, to help a starving artist, whatever you can do. So just live your best life.
And I think, one of the things that Richard mentioned was experiences, that spend more time and more money on experiences and making memories. I mean, that if I hadn't had all these experiences, I wouldn't have been able to write the book that I wrote, because it's all about traveling through life and being positive and looking forward to the next day. And that's one of the things that keeps us young, is that we're always forward motion. And and if I could just put one other, just a little quick thing in there, is that if you do go on Amazon to find my book and type in Gay Boy's Life, you probably won't find it. What you should do is go into your Safari or Google or whichever, and just type in Gay Boy's Life Amazon, and then it'll come right up. But and if you do buy the book, I hope you find a way, on Facebook or whatever, to let me know what you thought, and I hope it really will touch you if you do read it.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.